It's a week, it's a game, it's an opponent that really needs no introduction. It's just simply labeled the game. It's Ohio State, Michigan week. Pat Murphy's on the line from Bucknuts and the Buckeyes and Wolverines. It's always a spectacle, an event, a rivalry, and means so much to each state, regardless of the records. But on top of that, the Big Ten championship game appearance lies in wake and a college football playoff appearance potentially as well. So it is huge beyond belief. Pat, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm definitely good. A big week, whether you're in Columbus, Ann Arbor. Ryan Day even said yesterday that people all over the country, he was a guy who didn't grow up with this rivalry as an Ohio State or Michigan fan, but certainly knew about it. So it's a big week for college football just in general, but especially in this part of the country for these two teams.
You know, I was in the SEC for 7 years covering Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Alabama. And they didn't talk about anything outside the SEC except this game.
Yeah.
They would mention this game and talk about this game in this particular week. It is huge. But before we could get to this one, obviously, Ohio State had to take care of business against a dangerous Michigan State team. And oh my goodness, that first half performance was something completely unexpected, off the charts. And we don't exactly know how good Michigan State is. Maybe they're not the number 7 team in the country, but I got to think that they're definitely one of the top 15 teams in the country. And that was just an annihilation.
Yeah. I mean, it was about as close to a perfect half of football as I've seen. And I don't think perfect halves of football happen very often. So, there were still certainly some things to learn from, but Ohio State came out, scored on the first 7 possessions of the game, only didn't score on the 8th because they took a knee to go into halftime, up 49-0. Obviously, the defense pitches a shutout in that first half, really limits Michigan State's offense in any way. It was the most impressive performance I've seen from this defense all year, for sure. Kenneth Walker, 6 carries for 25 yards. He didn't even come back in the game in the second half. So the Buckeyes really take the strength of the Spartans offense out. A lot of it was put on the shoulders then of Peyton Thorne, the quarterback. He was 14 of 36 for 158 yards. Did get a late touchdown early in the fourth quarter. The second unit for the Ohio State defense had been in for quite a while there. I mean, CJ Stroud sets a record for consecutive completions with 17. He only threw 3 incompletions, was 32 of 35, another 400-plus yard game, 6 touchdowns, which ties an Ohio State record. Chris Olave tied and then broke the Ohio State career reception record in that game. He had 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jackson Smith-Njigba, 105 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson, 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was hard to tell which was the bigger story, the fact that the defense played as well as it did, or that this offense just keeps on churning the way that it has been all season. It was easily the best game, the most complete game Ohio State has played all year, and they benefited from it, moving up to number 2 from number 4 in the college football playoff rankings. Oregon loses, so that obviously was going to move the Buckeyes up at least a spot, but the committee deemed that Alabama's, I think it was a 7-point win against Arkansas, where I don't think the Crimson Tide looked bad by any stretch of the imagination, but didn't look as dominant against a ranked opponent as Ohio State did. And obviously the committee had Michigan State ranked considerably higher than Arkansas. So Buckeyes jumped up to number 2 on Tuesday night. And now they've obviously got this game against Michigan, the number 5 team in the country, to kind of justify that ranking and all that. You mentioned the Big Ten championship championship game appearance that's on the line. This game doesn't need any extra motivation. That was what we heard from a lot of the Ohio State people yesterday, or on Monday, Tuesday, whatever day it was, Tuesday, yeah. And I mean, there were questions about last year and not having the game, and this game being for all the marbles, and obviously this game needs nothing extra added to it. We've seen that plenty over the years, but having some more on the line is certainly makes it more interesting, at least for someone like me who covers it, and I imagine for fans as well.
The offense is the offense, and it's going to gain the attention because fans gravitate to offense, and you can apply the numbers to it, and it's exciting and all of that. And it was tremendous. You ran down the the numbers, both rushing and passing, and just them lighting up the skies the entire first half. Who knows what could have been possible if it would have been needed in the second half, but to roll up
Right.
500 yards against anybody in one half of football is just incredible. But the defense, they don't give up a meaningful touchdown. They shut Michigan State out in the first half. I'm going to be extremely nitpicky, and this has nothing to do with the defensive performance. I would have liked to have seen what would have happened had Kenneth Walker had the carries that we discussed last week to have that type of game to say, okay, what are they going to do when he slams it ahead 30 times against them? What's going to happen? But for the 6 carries he got a little bit loose on one run, but 25 yards. So they obviously contained him. And Peyton Thorne in this Michigan State passing attack has been pretty lethal the whole season. And if the offense is catching up to the defense at this rate, it's all pretty scary.
Absolutely. It was surprising to me that Michigan State went away from the running game. Obviously, getting down early means you have to throw the ball to some degree, but I mean, it was 21-0 at the end of the first quarter, but it just seemed to me that if you're going to try and stay in the game, you need to keep Ohio State's offense off the field. Yes, you obviously have to score points with the Buckeyes, and I think that's been the case all year and a struggle for every team. But the Spartans' game plan, the Spartans' offense is based around Kenneth Walker, and getting him going should have been, in my mind, what Mel Tucker and the Michigan State coaching staff did. Now, maybe they just realized that Ohio State was so focused on shutting that aspect down that they just thought they couldn't do it. Haskell Garrett told us after the game and reiterated it this week that the focus coming in was to not let Kenneth Walker have a big game, to shut down that run game on the Ohio State defensive line. So they did that. I mean, Haskell Garrett made a tackle for a loss on the first play of the game for the defense, and it kind of set the tone. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, it was as good of a defensive performance as the Buckeyes have had all year, and they're going to need that going forward. Against Michigan, potentially in a Big Ten championship game, and then potentially in a college football playoff. This defense needs to play. I don't know if it'll play as good as it did against Michigan State, but it needs to play closer to that level than we've seen it in some games this year.
Talking Buckeyes with Pat Murphy from Bucknuts 247 Sports. So this would be the time to jump on at Bucknuts and carry this on through to what we believe should be a Big Ten championship game as well, and on through to the playoffs. But Ohio State, Michigan front and center. Of course, this is the game. And if you grow up in Ohio and Michigan, regardless of the records, and I'll speak for myself, if these two teams were 3-8, I grew up not caring anymore for a game when the Rose Bowl was on the line versus if they were both 500. It just meant that much to me, and I know it does to so many people out there, but they're both 10-1, and of course playing for a college football playoff appearance potentially. So the one issue that Michigan would present is these two NFL future defensive ends that are going to come at CJ Stroud and Hutchinson and Ajabo and some other really good players on defense. Those two get the pub, Junior Colson, Josh Ross, and some other ones in that front seven. So possibly the best front seven that Ohio State's faced this year.
I think it definitely is. And Ryan Day said as much. Some of the other coaches that spoke this week, the players, all in agreement. Nicholas Petit-Frere, who we talked to on Tuesday, said the same thing. He's Ohio State's left tackle. I mean, Ohio State's offensive line has been great all year, especially in pass blocking, but they haven't faced a defensive line, and it's a full defensive line. The two stars on the outside obviously get the credit, but it's a full defensive line in the middle as well. So it's going to start with being able to protect CJ Stroud. Obviously, Michigan's going to try and disrupt him. Really, even if they can't get to him, just get him off his spots, mess up the timing with the receivers, those type of things. And I think that's where it starts. I'll be very interested, too, to see if Ohio State can get the run game going. It didn't happen the last couple of weeks. Last week, 206 total yards on 43 carries, but TreVeyon Henderson only had 63 yards, 9 carries. It wasn't really until Master Teague came into the game in the second half, and Ohio State was trying to run some clock with a lot of the backups in, that they really focused on the run. I think in a game like this, you're going to need to be able to run the ball. Michigan obviously can do it very well. Ohio State's proven it can run the ball. TreVeyon Henderson is very good, still getting odds for the Heisman Trophy and whatnot. But he's a guy who's slowed down a little bit here at the end of the season. They're going to need to get that going. You can't, I don't think, rely entirely on CJ Stroud and this passing attack. I do think that'll be important. And obviously these receivers have proven to be unguardable these last few weeks. But, I think it's got to be a balanced attack from Ohio State's offense. And that starts, as we started with, getting protection up front and limiting the pass rush and really any sort of rush from the defensive line of Michigan.
Yeah, I made a comment during our Buckeyes live show that I haven't seen three receivers like this on one team, where I'm watching college football games all over the place all day Saturday, every week, and I don't see guys consistently separating like this and making the kind of catches. And it's more not about the spectacular catch, because Stroud's usually throwing the ball within radius, but it's just separation consistently against good players and good secondaries.
Absolutely. And you saw it at times in this game. The 2 touchdowns to Chris Olave, he was able to get free enough. Stroud was able to fit it into windows. The first touchdown to Garrett Wilson was one where Ryan Day said on his radio show that when they came off the sideline after the first offensive possession, the feedback the staff got from the receivers were that they were playing the receivers tight. And so they started to call some plays where if you can beat your man one-on-one, which Garrett Wilson did on that, I think it was a 77-yard touchdown. The speed of these guys is such that they're going to win that race as long as CJ Stroud puts it on the money. Garrett Wilson did that. Jackson Smith and Jigba has been great at getting open all year. I feel like I keep repeating myself with these. I don't know how you cover all three of these guys. It's just, when you have one, when you have a Jamison Williams at Alabama, some of the other top receivers in the country, you can cover with a safety, you can double team, you can do some things. And obviously the good receivers like those guys still get open. But when you have three that are all top quality wide receivers, future probably NFL first round draft picks, and then a quarterback who can get these guys the ball, which is really all CJ Stroud needs to do. It's tough. It's tough. If a defense can do it, I will be impressed to see how they stop this passing attack.
Folks, please like the video, share these videos out on social media, and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. We've got team channels all over the place. And if you're just wanting to help us in particular, just build the network of channels, we've got an Iowa channel closing in on 1,000 subs. That's a key YouTube metric. So please help us out over there. Got Pat Murphy on the line from Bucknuts. Check out his work, of course, on 247 Sports. And again, I go back to the Kenneth Walker 6-carry game where we didn't see him slam it ahead time after time after time. But the potential's there now with Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. And I got to think Oregon was by far the most successful rushing team against Ohio State, and maybe the Minnesota game for much of that game with Mo Ibrahim. So the Buckeyes, tremendous rush defense, but they did show some cracks, at least early in the season.
It's definitely gotten better. I will say that. And last week was kind of the proof of that. But each week we've seen when Ohio State's played, whatever running back it's been, teams have had more struggles running the ball against the Buckeyes as it's gone on. This defensive line early in the season was a little banged up. Some guys that maybe shouldn't have been in there in terms of experience were in there. And now they've got a deep rotation that they can go to, guys on the edge, guys in the middle. So it's helped in that aspect. The linebackers have settled into positions. They're scheming the right way, as opposed to early in the year when I think they were still trying to figure out what each guy was good at those positions. So it's certainly going to be key here. You mentioned 2 running backs, Hassan Haskins, over 1,000 yards on the year. Blake Corum, close, 778. Both have 10 or more touchdowns. I think Donovan Edwards is an interesting one. He kind of came alive last week, catching the ball out of the backfield. If they go to him, the freshman who Ohio State recruited, how does that change the complexion of things a little bit? I'm always interested in this game for somebody who can kind of break out. We saw Chris Olave do it 3 years ago in the game. Garrett Wilson had the big touchdown catch for Ohio State after Justin Fields got hurt and then came back in the game 2 years ago in Ann Arbor. I mean, there's a list of tons of guys who have kind of made their name or gotten their start in this game. So for Michigan, I wonder if one of these running backs could be a guy like that if the Wolverines are going to be able to win this game. And then obviously on the Ohio State side, Ohio State's kind of established themselves offensively and their weapons. But maybe does a Travion Henderson have a monster game, a J.K. Dobbins-like game. Ezekiel Elliott had a big game against Michigan. Do they establish the run on the Buckeye side and get him really going and not have to rely on the pass as much? It'll be interesting to see. Obviously, Michigan has a good defense, so the Wolverines will come prepared, I imagine. But yeah, I think the running game on both sides will be very interesting in this contest.
And it's interesting to note along those same lines that Travion Henderson and Donovan Edwards, I believe, were the number 1 and 2 rated running backs in their class coming out of high school. The last thing here is the psychological edge that Ohio State has, just winning this game time after time after time. It's in the big house. They know they've got a good team. This is what I'm curious to see, just because Michigan, the big house, is known as being kind of a wine and cheese kind of crowd. Like, they don't get too excited, but obviously Ohio State's different every year, and there's a different vibe in the stadium regardless of the records. But you add on to it that they think they have a chance. So if they can get an early lead or do something positive early, you would think that's when that place is going to get loud and raucous.
The only time I've ever been to the big house, Michigan Stadium, is for these Ohio State Michigan games. And to me, it's always been a great atmosphere. I know the sound there doesn't capture as well because of the shape of the stadium, as well as it does at some, but as long as the game has been competitive, I've always thought that it's a good crowd. And sometimes even when the Ohio State fans have kind of taken over some of those years, it's been a good atmosphere. I imagine that this will be one of those. Obviously, both teams highly ranked, a lot on the line. And you mentioned if Michigan can get up early, we've seen that happen. Actually, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe it was 4 years ago in Ann Arbor when Michigan got up and Ohio State had to come from behind and obviously still won the game. But I expect it to be interesting. Ryan Day talked on this week about the Buckeyes are planning to do silent counts and hand signals and all that stuff that you expect. Ohio State hasn't faced a real hostile environment this year. Minnesota, the first game of the season, was a good crowd, but not as big, obviously, as the numbers that will be at Michigan Stadium. Nebraska was probably the closest thing to what they'll face this weekend. That crowd, though, not as hot. I mean, it's loud for sure, but the Nebraska crowd applauds the away team when they come out of the tunnel. So it's a different atmosphere. Also, Ryan Day talked a lot this week about coming out of that tunnel. Both teams come out of the same tunnel in the middle of the stadium, and fans are right on top of them. There's a lot of jawing that happens between players. He said between coaches sometimes. The fans obviously are yelling things and stuff like that. So he talked about managing emotions, especially in that tight space when you're all kind of confined in there. Usually that stuff tends to happen either during the warm-ups or at halftime when both teams are trying to get in. So it'll certainly be interesting. I think it's always interesting in Ann Arbor. These teams are both good. I can't see this game just being a blowout like we've seen at some of the times. I mean, the dominance of Ohio State in this recent series history hasn't always been in blowout fashion. I mean, I know there's the games where Ohio State certainly has won comfortably, but a number of these games have been closer than people remember. And I expect this will be certainly a competitive one as well.
For sure. For sure. No question about that. It'll be another edition in the series of what many consider the greatest rivalry in college football, if not sports. Pat, we appreciate you stopping by. We know that you'll do a tremendous job covering the game. Enjoy it as well.
For sure. Thank you.